My name is Henry Caldwell, and for 43 years, every sunrise of my life has looked the same. Pale gold light spilling over acres of wheat and alfalfa, the low hum of irrigation pumps in the distance, the smell of earth that never quite washes out of your hands no matter how hard you scrub. This land isn't just where I live. It's who I am. I bought this farm in eastern Kansas when I was 27, newly married, stubborn, and foolish enough to believe hard work alone could solve anything. My wife, Margaret, used to laugh at that belief. She said the land would teach me patience, and life would teach me humility. She was right about both. Margaret passed away 7 years ago, and since then, the farm has been quieter. Too quiet sometimes. But it still breathes. It still remembers us. And I thought my son did too. Before this story goes any further, let me ask you something. If you were in my place, would you sell the one thing that carries your entire life's history to fund someone else's dream? Even if that someone was your own child? Let me know in the comments, and if stories about family, betrayal, and quiet revenge resonate with you, take a second to like and subscribe. These stories matter more than people think. I have one son, Ethan Caldwell, 32 years old, sharp-tongued, sharp-minded, and always convinced he was meant for something bigger than dirt under his fingernails. Ethan grew up on this farm, but he never belonged to it. While other kids learned how to fix fences and drive tractors, he stayed inside with books, laptops, and ideas that moved faster than the seasons ever could. I was proud of that once. I told myself every parent wants their child to go further than they did. Ethan went to college on the East Coast, then grad school, then Silicon Valley for a while. He learned a new language there. Not code. Confidence. The kind that borders on contempt for anything slow, old, or rooted. We spoke on the phone once a week, sometimes less. He always sounded busy, always sounded important. I told myself that was normal. That distance was the price of success. Then one evening last spring, Ethan showed up unannounced. I was repairing a fence near the north field when I saw his rental car crunch down the gravel drive. He stepped out wearing shoes that didn't belong on farmland and sunglasses that hid his eyes. He hugged me, stiffly, like someone checking a box. We ate dinner together, sitting at the same oak table where Margaret used to scold us for elbows on the surface. Ethan barely touched his food. He kept glancing around the house, at the walls, the beams, the windows looking out over the fields. Not with nostalgia. With calculation. After dinner, he finally said it. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something serious." His voice was calm, rehearsed. That should have warned me. He told me about his startup. A logistics platform, or an AI-driven supply chain solution, or something equally abstract. He spoke quickly, confidently, throwing out numbers that felt too large to belong in the same room as our old grandfather clock ticking steadily behind him. Then he said, "I need capital. Real capital. Investors are interested, but they want to see skin in the game. Family backing." I nodded slowly, already feeling a knot tighten in my chest. He leaned forward. "The farm, Dad. If you sell it, we'd have more than enough." The words landed like frost on spring crops. I didn't answer right away. I looked at my hands instead. The scars, the calluses, the veins standing out from decades of work. "This land isn't an asset," I said carefully. "It's my life." Ethan sighed, the way people do when they think you're being unreasonable. "That's emotional thinking. This is business." That's when I knew we were standing on opposite sides of something deeper than money. I told him no. Not angrily. Not dramatically. Just no. I explained that the farm was paid off, that it still provided a modest but steady income, that it was security. That it was Margaret's ashes scattered beneath the old sycamore by the creek. Ethan's jaw tightened. "You're choosing dirt over your son," he said quietly. That hurt more than he knew. I told him I believed in him, just not enough to gamble everything I had left. He left the next morning without another word. Weeks passed. Then months. Calls went unanswered. Messages stayed unread. I told myself he was licking his wounds, that he'd come around. Instead, the letters started arriving. Official envelopes. Legal language. Notices I didn't fully understand at first. Ethan had found another way. And as I stood in my kitchen one morning, reading words that suggested my own son was challenging my right to the land I had built my life on, I realized this wasn't just a disagreement anymore. It was a trap. And I was already standing inside it. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday, folded crisply inside a heavy white envelope that felt too formal for anything good. I remember standing at the counter, coffee going cold beside me, rereading the opening line until the words blurred together. It was written in careful, neutral language, the kind designed to sound reasonable even while cutting at the bone. It informed me that my ownership of the farm was being reviewed due to potential discrepancies related to an old family trust. A trust one barely remembered signing decades ago, back when Ethan was a child and Margaret and I were told it was just a precaution. A way to ensure things passed smoothly someday.
I felt a chill crawl up my spine.
That night, I barely slept. Every sound outside made me think someone was already measuring my land, dividing it up on paper while I lay there helpless. I tried calling Ethan. Straight to voicemail. I left a message, calm at first, then sharper as the silence stretched on. He didn't respond. Over the next few weeks, more letters came. From lawyers. From a financial firm I had never heard of. Each one chipped away at my certainty, suggesting that parts of the land might already be collateral, that signatures from years ago could be interpreted in ways I had never intended. I felt stupid. Old. Outpaced. This was Ethan's world now. Contracts and loopholes and fine print. And I was a man who still wrote checks and shook hands. I drove into town and sat in a small law office that smelled faintly of dust and old books.
The attorney, a woman named Claire Whitman, listened quietly as I laid everything out.
She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she leaned back and said, "You're not wrong to be scared. But you're not powerless either." That sentence kept me standing. She explained that Ethan hadn't outright taken anything. Not yet. What he'd done was set pressure. A legal vice designed to make me panic, to make selling seem like the easiest way out. "He's counting on you giving in," she said. That realization hurt more than the legal threat itself.
Ethan wasn't just chasing a dream anymore.
He was willing to corner his own father to get there. Still, part of me hoped there had been some mistake. Some misunderstanding. I wrote him an email that night, longer than I should have, explaining my fear, my confusion, reminding him of his mother, of summers spent fishing in the creek, of the way he used to fall asleep in the barn loft while I worked below. I asked him to call me. He replied 2 days later with one sentence. "This doesn't have to get ugly if you do the right thing." I stared at that line for a long time. Ugly. As if what he was doing wasn't already tearing something apart. The pressure didn't stop there. County officials showed up to inspect property lines. A man from the bank called asking about refinancing options I had never requested. Even neighbors began asking questions, worried whispers traveling faster than I could answer them. The farm started to feel smaller, like the walls were closing in. Some nights, I sat at the kitchen table and seriously considered selling. Taking the money, giving Ethan what he wanted, and walking away. It would have been easier. Quieter. But every time that thought crept in, I remembered Margaret's voice, steady and firm.
"Don, give up ground you can, get back."
So I didn't sign anything. I didn't sell. And that's when Ethan escalated. One afternoon, I received a notice stating that Ethan would be visiting the farm with a legal representative to discuss resolution options. The phrasing made my stomach drop. He wasn't coming as my son. He was coming as an opponent. Claire advised me to let them come, to listen, but to agree to nothing. When Ethan arrived, he barely looked at me. He introduced the man beside him, a polished lawyer with a smile that never reached his eyes. They sat across from me at the same table where we used to play cards on rainy evenings. The lawyer spoke first, outlining scenarios, numbers, timelines. Ethan watched me the way you watch someone struggle with a math problem you already solved. Finally, Ethan spoke.
"Dad, this is your last chance to be reasonable."
He laid out the trap clearly then. If I sold voluntarily, I'd walk away with dignity, some money and peace. If I didn't, the legal battle would drag on, draining my resources until I had no choice. "I don't want to hurt you," he said, his tone flat. But I won't let you hold me back.
I felt something in me harden.
I realized he had already made peace with hurting me. He had justified it. That night, after they left, I stood outside under the stars and felt the weight of the land beneath my boots. For the first time, I stopped thinking like a frightened old man and started thinking like someone who had survived 40 years of bad weather, broken equipment, and impossible odds. I called Claire and told her I was done being reactive. Good, she said. Because now we start being strategic. What Ethan didn't know was that his pressure had forced me to look more closely at things I had ignored for years.
Old documents.
Old agreements. And buried in those papers was something he had overlooked. Something that would change everything. Claire came out to the farm the following morning, her shoes sinking slightly into the mud as she walked toward the porch, a thick folder tucked under her arm. We spread decades of paperwork across my kitchen table, the same table that had held birthday cakes, school projects, and Margaret's Sunday roasts. This time, it held the past in black ink. Deeds, amendments, handwritten notes, old correspondence with a local cooperative bank that no longer existed. We worked in silence for hours, the only sound the clock ticking and the wind brushing against the windows. Then Claire stopped. She adjusted her glasses and leaned closer to one document, an addendum to the trust Ethan was now using as a weapon. It was dated nearly 25 years back, signed during a refinancing Margaret and I had done after a bad drought year. Claire traced a line with her finger. Henry, she said carefully, did Ethan ever mention this clause to you?
I shook my head.
She looked up at me, something close to a smile forming.
He probably doesn't know it exists.
The clause was simple but devastating. It stated that any beneficiary attempting to forcibly liquidate the trust's primary asset against the will of the living grantor would immediately forfeit all beneficiary rights until the grantor's death, at which point distribution would be reassessed at the discretion of a third-party executor. In plain terms, Ethan had played his hand too aggressively. By trying to trap me, he had triggered a safeguard designed to protect exactly this situation. Margaret must have insisted on it. The thought of her, quietly planning for a future she wouldn't live to see, made my chest ache. Claire explained the next steps. We wouldn't threaten. We wouldn't posture. We'd simply respond formally, calmly, and let the law do what it was meant to do. The response went out within 48 hours. Ethan called me that same evening. For the first time in months, his voice wasn't confident. It was tight. What is this? He demanded. You know exactly what it is, I replied, my tone steady. Silence stretched between us. Then he tried another angle. Apologies edged with blame. He said he was under pressure. That investors were demanding answers. That he hadn't meant to hurt me. I listened. When he finished, I told him something he hadn't expected. I would have helped you, I said.
Just not like this.
He didn't respond. The legal process moved faster than I had dared hope. Ethan's claim collapsed under its own weight. The firms involved quietly withdrew. County inspections stopped. The phone calls ended. Word traveled through town, and neighbors who had been cautious before began stopping by again, offering help, bringing pie, asking if I needed anything.
The farm exhaled.
A month later, Claire informed me that Ethan's beneficiary status had been formally suspended pending review. There would be no windfall. No forced sale. His startup, I later learned, folded within the year.
Overleveraged.
Overpromised. Underprepared. We haven't spoken since. Not because I slammed the door, but because he hasn't tried to open it. And that's something I've made peace with.
I still walk the fields every morning.
I still fix fences and curse stubborn equipment. Margaret's tree by the creek is taller now, its roots deeper. Sometimes I stand there and think about the line between love and enabling, about how saying no can be the hardest form of care. I didn't win because I outsmarted my son. I won because I refused to abandon myself. If this story struck a nerve, if you've ever been asked to sacrifice your entire life for someone else's ambition, I want to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, take a moment to like and subscribe. Somewhere out there, someone is standing at their own kitchen table, wondering if they're allowed to say no. This might help them decide.